I almost met a murderer at midnight, terrifying true horror story. The night we almost met a killer. I've never liked camping, not one bit. The dirt, the bugs, the night spent in a sleeping bag that feels like a rock. None of it ever made sense to me. But my dad, he thrived in the wilderness. Every summer, he dragged me and my friends, or more accurately, me alone, into the woods to reconnect with nature and disconnect from technology. By the time I was a sophomore in high school, I'd had enough. Finally, I convinced my dad to let me bring a friend along to make the ordeal slightly more bearable. Enter Charles. He was a hardcore Boy Scout type, the kind of kid who loved camping more than anyone I knew. But unlike some people, he didn't look down on me for hating the outdoors. In fact, he teased me lightly but genuinely made the experience bearable. At least if I was going to suffer, I'd be suffering with someone who knew how to pitch a tent without turning it into a disaster. The trip started badly. A friend of my dad had messed up the campsite booking. Instead of a remote, peaceful spot deep in the woods, we ended up somewhere overdeveloped. Paved walkways, indoor bathrooms, and even a playground for kids. Basically glamping. And if that wasn't enough, a mini amusement park sat right next to the campsite. A Ferris wheel, carnival games, roller coasters, the whole thing. Charles kept pointing it out, laughing at how fake this camping trip was. And I started to get annoyed. But eventually, we had no choice but to make the best of it. The adults grumbled, set up their tents, and Charles and I managed to pitch ours flawlessly. Once dinner was over, Charles suggested we sneak away into the woods. And I didn't have the heart to say no. We weren't just wandering aimlessly. We had a plan. Hidden in Charles's old Altoids tin was a small pipe and some weed. Not much, just enough to relax. We laughed, joked, and felt invincible, like we were in a world of our own. Hours passed. The adults slept. Our energy didn't wane. Charles's mischievous grin gave away his next idea: explore the amusement park. At first, I hesitated. It was late, well past midnight, but the lure of adventure and the adrenaline of sneaking around was irresistible. We approached the fence and climbed over with relative ease. The park was dark and eerily quiet, the only sound being the hum of the occasional security golf cart. It was like a stealth video game come to life. We crept along the paths, ducked behind buildings, and sprinted across open stretches when a guard passed nearby. Then, we reached the base of a roller coaster. Up close, it was much larger than it appeared from the campsite. Its maintenance stairs loomed like a metallic ladder into the sky. Step by step, we ascended, the metal clanging softly beneath our weight. At the top, the view was breathtaking, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. We could see the entire park below us, shrouded in darkness. We took one quick photo, and then knew we had to retreat. The descent was faster, almost too easy, until we noticed movement. About 30 feet away, crouched between buildings, was another figure. Not a child, not a guard. A man staring straight at us. His clothes were tattered, his posture unnerving, and the most horrifying part, a dark liquid streaked across his face. Blood. Charles and I exchanged terrified glances. The man darted through a patch of light, giving us a horrifying glimpse. A disheveled, possibly wounded adult, eyes locked onto ours. I felt my heart hammering in my chest. For the first time, our game-like adventure felt real. We stayed frozen, watching him disappear into the shadows. When the guard finally passed, we bolted, keeping our distance, avoiding being seen. Back at the fence, we scaled down silently and dropped to the ground. We didn't laugh anymore, not even a chuckle, only the desperate desire to reach our tent alive. Morning brought a surreal normalcy. Birds chirped, campers stirred, life went on. But then came the announcement. A man had been stabbed to death the night before at a lake 4 miles from our site. The suspect? Still at large. Description matched exactly what we had seen. A disheveled adult male, possibly injured, with blood on his clothes. Charles and I didn't speak. We didn't tell anyone. It was as if we were two kids carrying a secret too heavy to share. Part of me still wonders why we stayed silent, why we didn't come forward. That single choice could have led to the capture of a dangerous man. But at 16, we were reckless. We were foolish. We were alive, and that was enough to keep us quiet. Even now, I can't shake the memory of that night. The dark amusement park, the man crouched in shadows, the cold realization that a murderer had been mere feet away from us. That night, I learned something about fear, about courage, and about the fine line between adventure and survival. And I had no idea that the next chapter terror was already waiting just around the corner. This time, in a place I should have considered safe, the job that shouldn't exist. After surviving the camping nightmare, I thought I had seen the worst life could throw at me. I was wrong. 2 years out of undergrad, I was living in a bubble of freedom. Online courses filled my weekdays, but money was tight. I bounced from one odd job to another, scrolling endlessly on job sites like Indeed, desperate to find anything that could pay a few extra dollars without tying me down. That's when I found it, a lifeguard position at a hotel in a nearby town. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, but the hours, backwards, 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., and requirements, specifically, someone who didn't speak Spanish. I laughed at the absurdity. I'm half Mexican. Spanish was my first language. But the pay, $30 an hour. That was gold. And if I was being honest, my curiosity was piqued. I applied and, surprisingly, got a reply within hours. The interview was quick. The first guy I met was friendly, laughing, joking. But then there was a stabbing. He didn't smile. He stared, sizing me up, speaking in Spanish. I froze. My heart raced. I knew he was testing me. I played dumb. The job seemed simple. Guard the pool, collect money from non-guests, and if anyone had a blue wristband, let them into the so-called pool house behind the building. No questions asked. At first, it was mundane. Guests swam, kids laughed, I collected money. But slowly, the pattern emerged. People with wristbands entered the pool house. Hours later, they came out with heavier backpacks, and the numbers grew. More wristbands, more overpayments. Something wasn't right. The day I realized the truth is etched in my memory. Heath, the friendly one, called me on the phone. His tone was clipped. He didn't want to explain. But one word rang loud and clear: money laundering. My gut sank. I was in the middle of something illegal, and I had no choice but to play along. Weeks passed. I watched. I collected. I saw people I didn't understand, speaking in Spanish, exchanging briefcases, bags, and envelopes. I wasn't allowed in the pool house, but the hints were obvious. I was part of a machine that operated just out of sight, behind the safety of a locked door. And then it happened. A kid started struggling in the deep end. My instincts kicked in. I jumped, dove, and pulled him out. When I surfaced, the crowd, guests and wristband wearers alike, cheered. Heath and his stabbing came down to thank me personally. Relief flooded me. This act of heroism was the only normal thing I'd done in weeks. But the feeling of safety was fleeting. Later, after a call with my mom, I turned back to find a stabbing staring at me, cold and calculating. He asked how long I had known Spanish. I lied. My pulse thundered in my ears. For a moment, I thought he might attack, or worse. But he simply nodded and walked away. That was the turning point. I realized I was trapped in a world of dangerous games, of criminals operating under a veneer of normalcy. Every interaction was a test. Every glance measured my value or my threat, and I was expendable. The next day, I left the hotel for good. I never returned. I never saw Heath or a stabbing again, but the paranoia lingered. Every van, every darkened window, every strange car made me jump. For months, I lived in fear, haunted by what I'd witnessed and by what I hadn't. Even now, years later, I can't explain why they needed me. Was it a front, a decoy, or something far darker? I don't know, but I do know this. The world is filled with shadows, with people operating in the spaces where you least expect them. And sometimes survival isn't about bravery. It's about knowing when to walk away. 2 experiences. 2 encounters with danger I never should have faced. One night in the woods, a murderer watching us from the shadows. One job at a hotel, standing in the middle of a criminal operation. And yet I survived both. By chance, by instinct, or by sheer luck. Life didn't hand me a happy ending. I didn't become a hero, and no one thanked me for my silence. But the lessons I learned, priceless. Respect your instincts. Never ignore the warning signs. And above all, some things are better left alone, because the world isn't safe. And sometimes, the monsters you avoid aren't hiding under your bed. They're hiding in plain sight.